Morning, everyone. Welcome to the Halifax Water regular board meeting on Thursday, June 22nd, 2023. We'll call the meeting to order. The first item of business I have is item 1A, ratification of the in-camera motions. Can I have someone make that motion? Commissioner Cuddle?
Yeah, sorry, I'm zooming in here again. Hold on here, sorry. I'm having issues with the sizing of things. I'm trying to find it here. Hold on. If someone else has it up there, that would be good. I have to switch to the diligent off of the Zoom. Or off of the web.
It should be on if you'd like. Move that the Halifax Water Board ratify the in-camera.
Thank you, Commissioner Digo-Gammon. Can I have a seconder? Commissioner Cuddle, would you like to second? Thank you. Any questions on the motion? We'll call the vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion is carried. Item 1B, approval of the order of business. Okay, do we ask for, so I don't have to have an amended motion. How do I, if somebody wants to add or delete, can we do that before we make the motion?
You would put the motion on the floor, and then if people want to add and delete, that would come up in the discussion.
Okay. Can I have somebody put the motion on the floor to approve the order of business, please?
I'll put the motion on the floor to approve the order of business and approve additions and deletions, which I don't think we have any.
Not yet.
I'll second.
Commissioner Kolomeitsev would second that. Any discussion? Okay. Did we lose Commissioner Zaharov? Yes. Oh my goodness, this meeting. Okay, I believe items 7I and 5I in the information reports would like to be brought forward into the main agenda. So we can make.
So Kostya is still online. It's just that his camera and mic are.
Okay. I believe Commissioner Zaharov wanted to bring 5-I and 7-I forward. Well, those becomes item 9 and, or what do we do with those? 8B and C?
Certainly, Madam Chair, we can do that. Or they could become 9 and 10. Or so, you're sorry, I apologize. Yes, 8B and C, yeah.
Okay.
And so just to be clear, would it be 5I that would become 8B and 7I that would become 8C?
Yes, please. Okay, any further discussion on the motion?
So the motion now is to, just to be clear again, the motion is to approve the order of business with those two additions that were just discussed.
In favor, yes.
Confirming that Commissioner Cuddle and Commissioner Kolomeitsev are comfortable with that motion, as they were the mover and the second.
I'm fine with that.
Yes.
Great.
Okay, all in favor of the motion on the floor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion is carried. Item 2, approval of minutes of the regular meeting held on Thursday, March 23rd, 2023.
I'll move the minutes.
Commissioner Cuddle, you're making that motion?
Yep, I'll make that motion that Halifax Water Board approve the minutes of March 23rd, 2023, regular meeting.
The seconder. Commissioner Kolomeitsev, thank you. Any discussion? Call for the vote. All those in favor of the motion on the floor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion is carried. We have one item of business rising from the minutes. Item 3A is the appointment of the general manager. I have a motion to be put on the floor.
I can do that, Madam Chair.
Okay, Commissioner Dealgammon,
Move that the Halifax Water Board ratify the appointment of Tarek Elizabeth as General Manager of Halifax Water effective July 24th, 2023.
Commissioner Kolomeitsev, will you second?
Yep, second.
Yes. Any discussion on that item? All those in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion is carried. And the board would like to officially welcome Tarek Elizabeth, and we're looking forward to him starting in July. Okay, moving on. Item 4.1, audited financial statements for the year ended March 31st, 2023. I have a motion to be put on the floor.
I can do that.
Commissioner Cuttle,
I move that Halifax Water Board approve the financial statements of the Halifax Regional Water Commission for the year ended March 31st, 2023.
the seconder.
I'll second.
Commissioner Kolomeitsev. I believe there's a presentation.
There is a presentation available. It was presented at Audit and Finance Committee on June 8th, so I can either complete the presentation again or just run through some highlights of the financial statements.
How about we go with the highlights, and if there's lots of questions, we'll ask for the presentation.
That works for me. So as I mentioned, Audit and Finance Committee met on June 8th to recommend that the board approve the financial statements for the fiscal year ended March 31st, 2023. At that time, there were a couple items outstanding from the audit. One resulted in an accrual for cost sharing invoices, which increases our assets and our liabilities and has no effect on income, so no changes to the statement of earnings. We ended the year under International Financial Reporting Standards with earnings of $47 million, and under the UARB reporting standards at a loss of $7.8 million. The differences between the two reporting standards include that accrued pension expense is not included in the UARB reporting standards, nor is our adjustment for the other comprehensive earnings. And under UARB reporting standards, we do include principal repayments on long-term debt, which is a rather large expense. So that those would be the main differences between the two reporting standards. Within assets, we did see a decrease in cash. Most of the changes in our statement of financial position relate to our increase in capital expenditures. So we saw a decrease in cash, but we saw an increase in both our capital work in progress and our utility plant and service. Within liabilities, we also saw the effects of the focus on capital expenditures. Our accounts payable has increased over the prior year. Our deferred contributed capital also increased as we acquired donated assets, and our regional development charge receivables have gone up. Some key highlights relating to the statement of earnings would include the increase in revenues over the prior year. We had a rate increase effective December 1st, 2022 for both water and wastewater volumetric charges, as well as stormwater charges. Last year, we also saw the stormwater boundary area expand effective June 1st, 2022, which also contributed to the increase in revenues over the prior year. With costs increasing, we saw some of the changes in our expenditures related to increasing in chemical prices, increasing fuel prices. With all the additions to utility plant and service, we had an increase in depreciation, as well as equipment repairs and an uptake in our lead service line renewal program. Those are the key highlights from the fiscal year end. Any questions?
Thank you, Alicia. Any questions? Go ahead, Commissioner Dico-Gammon.
Thank you. I don't have a question specific to the audited financial statements. I did review them as part of the board packet, but I wondered if the presentation that was given to Audit and Finance might be amended to the minutes so that we could look at that presentation as well. Sometimes seeing that rolled up version is helpful.
I believe it's already there. Is that true?
Oh, I didn't find it. Sorry.
It may not be.
I'll be honest. Most of the presentation is information pulled right out of the report. So the report covers most of the information, or if not all of the information, would be in the presentation. But we're happy to link that additional presentation for the board.
Yeah, I know that it pulls it out. I find it sometimes easier to just sort of hit the high points.
Okay.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
You're making me wonder what I read.
You're probably on Audit and Finance.
That too.
Actually, the presentation is available. The orientation is not great, admittedly, so that is something that we will fix. But I worked backwards, so I'm just trying to get to the first page where you can see it in diligent.
Oh, okay.
Page 72, Commissioner Dico-Gammon.
Of our board package?
Yep.
Yes, page 72 it begins. Thank you, Commissioner Rawlings. We'll have the orientation of those pages next. Thank you.
Sorry, Heidi. And on page 72, on what I'm looking at is the information from Grant Thornton.
Exactly, yes.
Yeah, that wouldn't, I don't know if that's the presentation.
Oh, sorry, Commissioner Dico-Gammon, that's what I jumped to. That was the only presentation we had, right, Alicia?
I did do a PowerPoint presentation.
PowerPoint. Okay, sorry, Commissioner Dico-Gammon. We will add in Alicia's presentation as well.
Thank you. Because Alicia, I know that you do really nice work, and when you pull that stuff out, I appreciate seeing it. So thanks, Alicia.
Sorry
Thank
about
you.
that. Any other questions? Okay, well, Commissioner Zaharov, I think you just made it back. Did you have any questions on the audited financial statements?
Hi, my apologies. Connection dropped.
Okay.
No, I didn't have questions on the statements.
Okay. Okay, we'll call for the vote. The motion is on the floor that the Halifax Water Board approve the financial statements for the Halifax Regional Water Commission for the year ended March 31st, 2023. All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion is carried. Well done, Alicia. I believe you're still up. Item 4.2, audited pension statements for the year ended December 31st, 2022. There's a motion to be put on the floor.
I can make that
Paul-Nico?
motion. Yep. That the Halifax Water Board approve the financial statements of the Halifax Regional Water Commission Employees Pension Plan for the year ended December 31st, 2022.
Do I have a seconder?
I'll
Commissioner
second
Kent? Commissioner Kent has seconded. Go ahead, Alicia.
Similarly, the year-end results for the pension plan were presented at Audit and Finance, but Heather Britton is with us if you would like to see the presentation, or she could provide some highlights.
I'm happy to do either. I can walk through the entire presentation that was provided at Audit and Finance, or I can just run through just a couple of highlights.
Any preference from the board members? Would you like a presentation or some highlights?
Highlights.
highlights.
Highlights? Okay.
Most
Heather,
times I heard
let's hear
like
some
that.
highlights.
That's great. Thank you. Okay, so the financial results for the Halifax Regional Water Commission Employees Pension Plan financial statements were provided to the Audit and Finance Committee on June 8th, 2023. Just a few highlights. First of all, the trending of the surplus. At the end of December 31st, 2022, we were reporting a surplus of 21.2 million. That surplus was down from December 31st, 2021. The surplus reported then was at 30 million. And December 31st, 2020, the surplus was 13.2, and 2019 was 8.7. So from 2019 to the end of 2022, to the end of 2021, there was an increase in the surplus. And then in 2022, still a surplus reported, but a decrease resulting from the state of the investment markets throughout 2022. And just some trending of the funded ratio. So January 1st, 2019, actuarial valuation, the plan had a going concern funded ratio of 101.6%. January 1st, 2022, as a result of the actuarial valuation, it was 119.6% funded. And as of January 1st, 2023, it was down a little bit, 112.3% funded, still reporting a surplus and still reporting a good funded ratio. Apologies. So in summary, the plan did receive a clean audit opinion. The state of the investment markets throughout 2022 were not entirely favorable throughout the year. I think it had its biggest dip in June or July, and then it started to recover a little bit throughout the year, reporting a little bit of revenue at the end of the year. The state of the investment markets and the HRM Master Trust has shown some recovery in the first quarter of 2023. And I think it was reporting an increase in the fair market value of investment assets of about 6.7 million. So things were looking good so far as far as the first quarter. The next actuarial valuation is scheduled for January 1st, 2025.
Okay.
Any questions for Heather on the audited pension statements? Wow. Okay, we'll call for the vote. The motion on the floor is that the Halifax Water Board approve the financial statements of the Halifax Regional Water Commission Employees Pension Plan for the year ended December 31st, 2022. All those in favor say aye.
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 All those opposed? Oh,
Sorry, I spoke too soon.
do I keep going?
Yes.
Okay, any abstentions? Motion is carried. Louis?
I did want to say thank you to Heather and Alicia. Both have been doing more than double duty. I think Alicia is doing triple or quadruple duty at this point. So I just wanted to pass on my thanks to all the hard work that they did this year in getting these statements to the board.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for bringing that forward, Louis. The board supports that compliment and that thanks. And congratulations on 2 clean audits.
Thank you.
Awesome.
Item 4.3, capital results for the year ended March 31st, 2023.
I can speak to this. Our year ended with a capital spend of 93.5 million. That's comparable to 65.3 in the prior year. So on our delivery rate for our 2022-23 capital budget of 106.5 million was 35.3%, comparable to 28.6% in the prior year. So we have seen an improvement over the prior year. We also increased the percentage of projects completed by fiscal year end by 3% to a rate of 33.8%. And the amount of, we have 169.9 available for spend going into fiscal 23-24. So that would be carry forward budget available. So overall, we've seen improvements, and we're just going to keep moving along. I believe Reid is available as well if he has anything to add, and we're happy to answer any questions.
Any questions from the commissioners?
Madam Chair,
Go ahead, Commissioner Zaharov.
thanks. Thanks for the update, Alicia. I think on one of the previous board meetings, we also requested to have like a dashboard that tracks the spend against each year, so it would be a little bit easier to understand the performance of capital budget from year to year, because it's not straightforward from the tables always. And the performance is still, you know, there's clearly an improvement, still remains low. So I suspect there will be some sort of an updates to the plan, how to start, you know, catching up faster on the delivery of the capital projects. I think it's probably for Reid.
Yep, thanks, Councillor Zaharov. Yeah, we can work with Alicia on that dashboard. And yeah, as we've told you, we are working, we're adding resources, and we've reorganized the department effective May 1st. And, you know, part of the issue is capacity to spend, and part of the issue is what, you know, how much planning has gone into the budget that you approve every January. The realignment's working on both parts. Our infrastructure planning group is up and running, and already I think we're going to see improvements in next year's capital budget and the predicted timing of things. We had 8 people in engineering included in last year's budget. We've filled 6 of those. The other 2 that we've not filled, we deliberately delayed until we could get the staff in place and figure out exactly what our gaps are and do more precise hiring. And then further, we're planning to hire additional 8 people. So there's a competition for 10 people in engineering staff that is with HR and should go out very shortly. You know, it's not easy to find people, but we're going to do our best. I think we can, you know, we're going to got a good diversity of jobs, and we're going to be very specific about who we're looking for. So we're hopeful that we'll be able to fill most of those positions. And our CPMIS project is well underway, and we're looking to wrap that up to the end of the year. So yeah, I mean, those are things we've been working on. It's a bit of a journey, but it's continuing to progress forward.
If I may, follow-up question.
Yep.
Go ahead.
Reid, so the staffing issues, they're not new. I think those issues were brought up multiple times to the board. Are you considering any backup plans, as you know, outsourcing some of the positions maybe to external consultants or something like that to you know, try to catch up on the capital plan?
Yeah, I think that's something we're prepared to look at. I mean, our first task is to hire internal staff because the demand's not going away and it's less expensive to get internal staff. So I want to give it an honest effort to do that. Our water supply enhancement program, we've hired a program manager. So in effect, we are outsourcing a lot of that already. They're going to do a lot of the work. You know, we probably have 2 staff designated to the water supply enhancement program now. Once that gets in full steam, that would probably require many more. I would caution that, you know, part of what the project engineers do is not just managing the technical part, but they have to manage the consultants, and that there's a lot of interaction with operations to make sure their needs are met. So you can never outsource 100%, but I think, you know, we'll know in a couple months whether we're going to fill all those positions or not, and we'll absolutely take a look at outsourcing opportunities if that's part of the solution.
Thanks.
And if I made the dashboard, we did look at the ability to provide the information you're looking for. Within SAP, it's extremely problematic, and we weren't able to recreate it. In terms of, as Reid mentioned, this CPMIS project and the new Kyenza system that is planned to go live over Canada Day weekend, we're hoping between those two we're able to provide better information for the board.
Any other questions on the capital results? Okay, thank you, Reid and Alicia.
You're welcome.
Okay, we'll move on to the capital approvals. Item 5.1, the Autoport wastewater pumping station funding approval.
Okay, thank you, Madam Chair. Greg Rice is with me. Greg is our manager of municipal engineering, and Greg has been working on this project for a long time. We've been working on this since 2016, so this is a 1974 pumping station that is well past its useful life. The current station is actually in the road right away on a manhole beneath Main Avenue or Main Road in Eastern Passage near Autoport. It's in the right of way. It's not ideal. It makes, with current occupational health and safety issues and traffic control, it's virtually impossible to access the station quickly and without a lot of people and to do maintenance. So modern design practice is to have all the controls and pump motors and things in an above ground building, which needs to be off the right of way. So we've been looking for land. The ideal place to have that pumping station would be off the right of way, immediately where the current one is. However, that land is owned by CN for Autoport. It's actively used by them, and it is in discussions with CN is very, very valuable to them. So we've had many discussions with CN looking at land options. So finally, just in the last 6 months, we found a parcel that's 130 meters away that's still reasonably close enough for us that it's workable, and was one that CN was willing to part with. So once we had agreement on that site, we accelerated the design, and so once we can get the financial approvals completed, we'll be going to tender. So the report's there in front of you. Greg and I are prepared to answer any questions.
Okay, we'll just put the motion on the floor and then we'll ask for any questions. Could I have someone make the motion? Commissioner Zahara?
Yep. I'll move that the Halifax Water Board approve the Autoport pump station replacement project for a total project cost of $8.9 million.
I'll second that.
Commissioner Kent will second. Thank you very much. Any questions on the motion and the presentation by Reid? Go ahead, Commissioner Kent.
I don't know where to put my hand up, so I'm just going to put it up.
Go ahead.
So Reid, this is good news. For those of, I think many of you would know, this is my district, and this is an area that has been, has needed some work for a while. And so my question for you is the negotiations with CN. Those are never easy, never. They don't like giving up much, but they certainly don't mind asking for lots. And I know more recently down here in this area, council has approved some right-of-way work for their tracks and things like that. So I'm just giving you some insight that, you know, give and take. They needed what we had, and now we being, Halifax Water and of course, corporation of the municipality, we need what they have. So just wanted to throw that in there, and thank you for the work on this. This is good news. So
Yeah, thank you, Kent. Yeah. Thank you, Commissioner Kent. And I will say CN was very cooperative with us on this, but these are my words, not theirs, but our first choice of piece of land was probably the land in that whole area they least wanted to part with. And I think we've come to a spot, we have, as the city does, we have many, many projects that we have to deal with CN on. And I think we have landed in a good spot on this one.
Good to hear. Thank you.
Yes, I agree. Well done. Very complicated. Go ahead, Commissioner Zaharoff.
Two questions, Reid. Does this budget includes the demolition of the existing station?
Greg is with me. Greg, do you want to speak to that?
Yeah, certainly. Good morning, Madam Chair, Commissioners. Yes, it does include costs for decommissioning of the existing station.
Okay, yeah, I was looking at the page 204 of the board package. I think it was just $30,000, so I wasn't sure if it would be sufficient to remove existing equipment.
Yeah, the existing station is a below grade structure for the most part, so we're going to remove the top couple of meters of that existing station and leave the remaining in place and fill it with structural fill.
And follow-up question, please, Greg. Same page 204 of the board package, the designer estimates it's 9.247 million. Can you please clarify the budget, because the ask is for I think in the summary you guys used 6.9 million, and the design estimate on 2.4 is total 9.2, or I'm looking at the wrong numbers?
You're referring to the cost estimate, the summary cost estimate, the project cost estimate that was provided versus the consultants?
Yes.
Yeah, there are some factors in there such as overheads and percentages that the contractor has added differently than we add in our spreadsheet. That's where the differences lie.
Okay, so it's basically difference in the various approaches to calculations and contingencies.
That's right, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Go ahead, Commissioner Kolomeitsev.
I'm just wondering what the timeline for this project would look like roughly.
Right.
Well, we're looking at getting this out to tender as quickly as possible. It's going to be a few months out to tender, and time frame for construction will probably be in the range of 1 year to 18 months. It's quite a large project with some big holes to dig. It's going to take some time. Does that answer your question? Yep.
Yes.
Okay.
Commissioner Cuttle.
Thanks. I like that answer, but some time. It's very broad. I was just wondering, like when we go through these reports, like we see projects like this that are big capital projects, kind of see them in isolation. And just a couple of reports back, we are looking at the capital expenditures for the year, and what percentage we're getting at, and the 33%. And sometimes I in the reports, I don't know if there's a piece that we can put in to try to understand, is this related to the capital expenditures for this year? That I think it was the 33%, just where it fits in the bigger picture of the scope of work that's happening for the year. And I don't know if there's a way to show that in the reports, but it might just help ground it in how it's being tracked through the other reports we get on capital expenditures.
If I can take a stab at that, Commissioner Cuttle, I think, as Louis said, once our CPMIS is in place and the Kayenta ERP is commissioned, I think we'll be in a much better place to report on some of that. But interestingly, this project has zero funding in the current year's capital budget. This is a project we've been working on since 2016, which has largely been held off by land issues. So the funding is coming from previous year's budgets, and then some additional funding from our money on hand that we have from previously deferred or canceled projects. So this is part of the backlog that we talk about, and it was delayed for land. So, but your question's good. If we can demonstrate to you, the financial part tells you where the money is coming from, but if we can show that maybe graphically, that would be useful.
Right, so some from 2016, some from 2020, and some from 22. Okay, yeah, thank you.
Commissioner Kent?
Yeah, so more localized, this question is, and so I think is Sushil still on the line. So that particular area has been problematic, I think, with odors and such. And at one point it was suggested to me, and Sushil has given me a lot of really good information with the tour and things, but suggested to me that the lines in that area are very flat and along main road, and those that would be attached to this pumping station is this, and a lot of on warm weathers when the line is not really getting a lot of flushing through, but a lot of that be maybe improved with this particular project?
So if I may, Councillor Kent, these are two separate sewer sheds.
Oh, I see. Okay. Okay.
Yeah, so that the issues were on the other side, and there are, as you know, mitigation measures in place for that area.
Yeah, and it has improved, just so you know, that part has improved, but I just wondered if the two were connected. So thank you. You answered my question.
Thanks.
Commissioner Deagle-Gammon?
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. So when I was reading this, I know that, it meets the no regrets unavoidable need, so that we have to do it. And I guess just on the funding piece, Reid, the original monies that were set aside in 2016-17, and then there was more added as we went along, but we still got to find, what, 5.6 million in future budgets. Am I reading that correctly? And then so that's just make sure I got that one in order to get up to the 8.9 million. And then the other thing is in terms of, the pricing of it, we're looking, at council, we're seeing almost every project coming back with, extensions, and we have to add more money to the projects. So I was trying to see what the contingency was in the plan, and I apologize, I think my memory fails me, but what amount you put in for contingency?
Yeah.
I know I read it and I can't find it in my head, sorry.
Okay. To your first point, the additional funding that we're looking for, and Alicia can correct me if I'm wrong, but we do have a fund that we rely on, which is we term from previously canceled or deferred projects, or that is money that's in previous capital budgets that was approved but not spent. So that is where that additional money is coming from. I'll invite Greg to jump in. We have a cost estimating framework that we work with for the Nova Scotia Utility and Review Board. And if you were talking about construction contingency, that is generally 10% if we are working on a completed detailed design, which we are in this case. There have been some projects where we thought there was some uniqueness or some volatility to the construction market recently, where we've asked for greater contingencies just so we don't have to come back. But we've
That's what I remember. Thank you, Reid.
Yeah, are we going with just, Greg? I can't recall. Are we 10% in this case?
This one, yeah, this one construction contingency is 10%.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Okay. So I guess my question is, do you still think 10% is going to get us by?
Well, I mean, that is very hard to say. We, last year we started with this approach of larger construction contingencies with the URB just to sort of speed the approval process. And they worked with us on it last year. This year we've had a couple, where they've sort of said, okay, you want a larger contingency, tell us what's special about this project, if you will. And so, this project is reasonably straightforward, although Greg is right, it's big, but there's not that kind of uniqueness to it. I think we're as comfortable as we can be with the contractor's estimate, but contractors are very, very busy. So sometimes we get prices that are lower and sometimes we get prices that are surprisingly higher. Contractors look at it, and depends on their busyness at the time. If they see a particular risk factor, they tend to price a lot into the risk these days, is what we're tending to find out. So, I think my answer is we're pretty comfortable with the estimate. We're using the contingency that the URB would like us to use, but it is a very uncertain construction market at the moment.
Thank you, Reid. Appreciate that.
Right.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay, we'll call for the vote. The motion on the floor is that the Halifax Water Board approve the Autoport pump station replacement project for a total project cost of $8.9 million. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion is carried. Moving on, item 5.2, Dartmouth Wastewater Treatment Facility course screen replacement funding approval. I have a motion to be put on the floor. Commissioner Kent, would you like to do this?
Sure. Move that the Halifax Water Board approve the additional funding request of $795,000 for the Dartmouth Wastewater Treatment Facility core screen replacement project for a total estimated cost of $1,295,000.
I'll second.
Zaharov has seconded that. Reid, are you up again?
I am, and I have George Michelin with me. George is our manager of facilities engineering. This project, it's as the motion indicated, it's for just under $1.3 million. Normally those wouldn't come to you, but we had below $1 million in the capital budget, and our capital approval policy requires that when a project goes from the budget line item amount goes from below $1 million to above $1 million, that it comes to the board before going to the Nova Scotia Utility and Review Board. For the most part, it is a reasonable, straightforward equipment replacement at the Dartmouth Wastewater Treatment Facility, replacing the automated course screen at the front of the plant. The facility is equipped with a bypass channel with a manual screen, and when we budgeted this, it was our intention to use that manual screen while we were doing this construction. So as the report details, it's just really an impractical and unsafe condition to use that manual bar screen. So in fact, what we're going to do is replace the manual bar screen with an automated one and replace the existing automated bar screen. So that's the project. If there's any questions, George and I would be happy to answer them.
Any questions? Oh, Commissioner Zaharov?
Me again, thanks, Madam Chair. Reid, quick question. So when the original project was scoped to use the manual screen, back then the estimate or understanding of its state was that it was useful, and then you started to look into the details and realize that it's not safe. Like, I'm just trying to understand why it was not scoped in the original project.
Yeah, maybe I'll start and I'll invite George to fill in on that. Yeah, I think Commissioner Zaharov, and this is perhaps some of what we're hoping to improve in the next year in how we develop these projects. So typically a request would come from operations that this is something we need to look at, and staff have a pretty good database of what the various equipment costs and what a typical project like this would entail. But generally, those requests come to us very quickly at capital budgeting time. So I would suggest that what's in the budget was sort of a budget for a typical project of this nature. And then as we start moving projects forward in the year, we begin the planning and developing the project. And that is exactly part of what we hope to address with our department reorg, is to make the budgeting process less of a condensed thing at the end of the year, so that those issues can be identified with smaller budgeting amounts in the first year and then a larger capital request coming later. So George, is that fair, or is there anything to add to that?
Yes, absolutely. The only thing I would add to that was the original budget was to just replace the existing course screen, and that would have been the conceptual stage when we began to address the capital budget request. It became very quickly evident in the preliminary design stage that to undertake this work and to effectively improve the functionality of the wastewater treatment facility, to include a second screen so that there was the ability to have a duty and standby, improved redundancy, and to also make the operation safer for the operations staff.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, we'll call for the question. The motion on the floor is that the Halifax Water Board approve the additional funding request of $795,000 for the Dartmouth Wastewater Treatment Facility Course Screen Replacement Project for a total estimated cost of $1,295,000. All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? That was just a late approval, right, Commissioner Kent? Yes? Opposed? Abstentions? Motion is carried.
Thank you.
Item 5.3, thank you, George. Item 5.3, Port Wallace Transmission Main Funding Approval. I have a motion to go on the floor. Commissioner Cuddle? Oh, you're on mute.
Here we go. Okay. I move that Halifax Water Board approve funding for the Port Wallace Transmission Main Highway 118 crossing, should be Park to Dartmouth Crossing project, an estimated cost of $10,390,000.
Second.
Commissioner Kent has seconded that. Go ahead, Reed.
Okay, thank you, Madam Chair. Kevin Gray is with me. Kevin, you've all met as Senior Manager of Regulatory Approvals in Kenda's group. We're doing this project in cooperation with some land development activities, so I'll just say a couple words and turn it over to Kevin. But I will just say in our infrastructure master plan, there was a recommendation to twin our existing transmission main from the Caledonia Road and Main Avenue area in Dartmouth to Burnside Industrial Park, to the area of our Acreley Reservoir. Around 2020, we built the first phase of that. And this phase is going to be built next by working with development. So I'll turn it over to Kevin to provide a few more details, and then we'll answer questions.
Yes, so as Reed said, this is the second phase of 3 to make that connection from Main Street in Dartmouth to Burnside. This will provide resiliency as well as allow for the expansion of Burnside. This project started to develop, I would say, in mid-2015 with a little more effort in 2018. The project is really piggybacking off of the requirement of Port Wallace Holdings Limited to connect a new wastewater pumping station to the North Dartmouth trunk sewer in Dartmouth Crossing. So all of the stakeholders only want construction to occur basically once. You don't want to go in and add this water main at a later date. So we started consultation, I think, with stakeholders in 2018. That included the Shuby Canal Commission, Department of Natural Resources, Nova Scotia Transportation. It's a very complicated project from the standpoint of stakeholders. It's in HRM right-of-way, HRM leased land, HRM parkland. It crosses the Shuby Canal, which is governed by Department of Natural Resources, and then crosses TIR's 118, and then back in the right-of-way of in Dartmouth Crossing. So from that standpoint, pretty complicated. And you'll notice that I'll be upfront, we put a 25% contingency on it. This value of project, when you marry it with the wastewater component, you're approaching somewhere between $25 and $30 million project. And our amount of contractors in Halifax that can do that work are pretty limited. So I think the price is going to be quite volatile. And with that, I think we can open it up to questions.
Thank you, Kevin. Go ahead, Commissioner Cuddle.
Thank you. Yeah, it certainly sounds like a complex project now that you describe it that way. I'm just wondering about the budget implications where it says this project has a 5% benefit to growth, and as such, 5% of the total project costs will be funded by the Water Regional Development Charge. And I'm just wondering if you can explain in a bit more detail what that's about.
In our application in 2019 to the URAB for our check-in on the Regional Development Charge, they went through our infrastructure list and actually selected this project out of the IMP. It originally had 0% funding from a regional perspective, and the board really wanted us to re-examine that. And then so with consultation with Jamie Hannum, the Director of Engineering at the time, we assigned a 5% benefit to growth of this. The original spirit of this transmission main project is for resiliency of the existing system, but there is a component that will support growth of Burnside, for instance. And the local system really is feeding the existing Port Wallace community. This isn't a requirement of the Port Wallace community, rather expansion of Burnside. So Burnside 13, for instance, and 14 in the future.
So the special planning area in Port Wallace, where we're anticipating a large number of new homes to go in there, and services and businesses and everything else, will this support that development?
It can. It's just not it's really resiliency of the system. The existing system can facilitate the growth in Port Wallace. This is really a twinning of the existing feed that goes to Burnside.
Okay.
So, and sorry, this phase of the project, because it starts at Breeze Drive, this phase in Waverly, the infrastructure coming down Breeze, like phase 3, would have more support, but there is no interconnection at this time to the local system.
Okay, thank you.
Go ahead, Commissioner Kolomeitsev.
Sure, I have a few questions. Thank you. My first is this the total cost of phase 2, or is this a component of phase 2 within the infrastructure master plan?
This will be the total cost of phase 2.
Okay, thank you. My second question was, I was going to ask about the RDC and how that was evaluated. And based on the discussions that Commissioner Cuddle brought up, I'm wondering if redundancy was the sole purpose versus growth in this area, what would the alternatives be compared to going through Shuby, for example, which may be more complex?
Alternatives, like we did look at routing, for instance. Early on, HRM took the lead on the actual routing of the utility corridor, as we like to call it. We did explore going down to, for instance, Redbridge Pond pumping station, which is at the beginning of the Waverly Road. And the cost implications, it really exceeded this routing. We also examined early on even going under Lake Charles. That was proposed by the developer, and we denied that from an operational perspective, far too costly. So this was the most cost-effective routing. The first part of your question was, sorry?
I was just wondering about how the RDC is decided. I think that was partly answered based on Commissioner Cuddle's question, but I was just wondering if, for example, the decision isn't only being made based on redundancy of the existing system, but on new customers, whether that's Burnside or Port Wallace, how does that feed into the decision on how much each of the developers would pay?
Yeah,
Yes.
Commissioner, sorry, Kevin. I was just going to say, if I can sum up a couple things, is this project has very little to do with facilitating the Port Wallace development. However, it makes perfect sense for the developer building Port Wallace to build this transmission main because they have other work to do on the same route. So the main purpose of building the transmission main is the infrastructure master plan has indicated that we need to strengthen our feeds to Burnside to benefit existing Halifax Water customers. And so as Kevin mentioned in reviewing our RDC, the URB asked us to re-examine that. We originally had it as 100% Halifax Water costs. They told us to go back and look at growth. And as Kevin indicated, it will facilitate some of the Burnside phase 13, 14 growth. So we've come up with 5% is benefiting future growth. So that's what the RDC is going to pay for. I don't know if that helps.
Any follow-up, Commissioner Kolomeitsev?
I guess my only follow-up would be a question on the location at Shuby Park. Would Halifax Water be paying for that pedestrian bridge? And how would, for example, maintenance be an issue when you're operating right next to where it almost looks like it's at the beach there? I'm just wondering if anyone can comment on that.
Yep, great question, because it's ongoing discussions right now with the developer and with HRM. So the structure itself has been decided to be owned by HRM, with Eastward Energy and Halifax Water having an initial capital expenditure. Like, we'll pay for our share that is required to support the infrastructure going through the bridge. It's actually going to be just under the paved surface. It's and contained. You won't be able to see our infrastructure. It's all housed within the bridge structure. And then we will have, after it's commissioned, we're going to establish a operation and maintenance agreement with HRM, Eastward Energy. And within that agreement, it will lay out not only the operation requirements, but also the capital renewal. So we'll have a very clear picture of how we're going to go forward with this structure.
Commissioner Schofield?
Just to add to Kevin's point, we had a bridge that we needed to replace in the park. So as Kevin and Reed have mentioned, this is about synergies. Rather than us replace a bridge and then have to have the infrastructure beside it, we're putting all of the components together and taking advantage of the synergies.
Thank you for that. Commissioner Deagle-Gammon?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So there was a beautiful presentation that was done at the Shuby Canal at the center there. And I'm just wondering, all of the graphics that were used there, are they still available? I know that, like, when we had the open house, Kendra was there, the developer was there, people from HRM were there. So I'm just wondering, are those beautiful poster boards and the explanations about what's going on, is that still available at the Canal Commission?
It's not at the canal. I don't think we left the posters there. We might have. But right now we're in the final design stage of the structure itself with the aesthetics. There's a little bit of back and forth between HRM Parks and the developer on what it's going to look like. Okay. And it is our full intention to, once we tender the project and have it awarded, we're going to do another public engagement, because we'll have a better sense of the schedule of the project. we're estimating this is about 18 months in order to complete it. And there's a lot of, since there's basically about 9 different areas to work in at any given time. And we have a lot of constraints. For instance, the highway will be a large constraint, as well as the Shuby Canal. And there's only certain times a year you can do that. So once we have it awarded and we've sat down with the contractor to understand their proposed schedule, we can relay that information to the public. And I just want to add that we will be creating a Port Wallace capital cost contribution charge area for this project as well, and that will have the wastewater component. And so we'll be coming back to the Halifax Water Board and the URAB once we have that tendered for that approval. So you'll see also the wastewater side of this project.
Great, thank you.
Would you like to see the PDFs of those attached to the board package, Commissioner Deagle-Gammon, or we'll wait for Kevin's update?
If members of the Water Commission haven't seen them, like I know that they were that moment in time, Kevin, right? So that
yeah, and I think
change.
They're a good representation, so we can add them.
They really are. They're so well done.
Kenda, did you have a comment that you popped in?
No, Kevin hit all the points, so it's all good.
Okay.
All taken care of. Thank you, though.
Commissioner Zaharoff?
Yep. 2 questions, please, Kevin. Can you walk us through the timeline for this phase, please? So you said the implementation roughly will take 18 months, but what are the other stages, the main stages for this phase?
For walking you through the phasing of this project?
Yeah, it's going to be tendered, and I assume it will take a few months to get the tenders. When are we expecting to see the work starting?
Hopefully, so we're hoping that it's tendered in the next within the next month, and then award, and then sit down with the contractor to discuss schedule. So it could start this fall. The thing about the project is there is always somewhere to work. So if it started this fall, I would expect that you might see some right-of-way work being completed. And then in the winter months, we'll probably like to go in off-peak of the park itself and get some work done there. But the crossing of Shuby Canal, we really want to work with the stakeholders. Like at the meeting, Councillor Deagle-Gammon referenced, we met with the kayak company, for instance, and we really want to keep them informed of when we're going to be in their vicinity. We want to stay out of the park in the summer. But beyond that, right now, it's just really, I'm just surmising what the schedule will be, because it is really sensitive to when it actually gets awarded.
Understood. Okay, thanks. Now makes sense, and it's going to be significant coordination there. And the other comment, I was looking at the total project at the table on page 339. If I'm not mistaken, maybe there might be an error in the HST calculation. I checked myself a few times, but it's not that I'm checking every table, but somehow this one looked at me. So if you could please double check, perhaps.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll take a look.
You think it'll impact our approval, Kostya?
I think that the requested funding would be slightly lower, roughly like $30,000 or $40,000. But I think if we will approve the higher funding, that should be fine still.
Okay. I just had 2 questions. Thank you, Kevin, for addressing the wastewater cost. It was mentioned that the wastewater was the driver, and then I wasn't sure where the project funding, so I believe you said you'll be coming back for that.
Yeah, it's slightly different because we're going to set up a CCC. The developer will assume the risk initially, and that's why they can tender it, and it will be all hinged on the approval of the CCC and the benefit to the existing community. Right now, we've on the linear infrastructure, we had an infrastructure master plan conducted in 2016 by HRM, and the benefit to existing was about 30%. There is a line item in our capital budget currently for the replacement of the 390 Waverly Road, and I expect it will be well within that budget, just because of the synergy of partnering with the developer on their requirements to supply the capacity for Port Wallace.
Thank you. And just a recommendation going forward, whenever you indicate an RDC contribution, if you could show a map of where the area is. So in this case, if we had a map showing Port Wallace in relation to the project, would be helpful, I think, for the board. And congratulations. I do know this has been almost a decade in the making. So well done, everyone. Any comment on shared cost? I didn't see, you certainly mentioned the ongoing conversations with HRM, the developer, and Eastward Energy. I didn't see any comment maybe on shared costs or cost savings that we may have seen. Any comment on that?
There is a cost savings. The synergy allows us for the most cost-effective installation, that's for sure. The local system in this area is very complicated. Waverly Road, John Brenton, and JB Drive, for instance, have a considerable amount of existing infrastructure. You'll see at the end of the day in JB Drive, there'll be four force mains, 2 transmission mains, 1 local collection, and then 1 local distribution. So this project really is benefiting from the developer's initiative.
Okay, thank you for that. Okay, we'll move to the vote. Oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
Sorry, thank you, Madam Chair. Kevin, how do we quantify that? How do we put a number on, the approximate savings? Because I think a lot of people, when we see, when you see these kinds of projects, the biggest challenge I think the Water Commission has is separating that this was something that we had to do, as opposed to people seeing that, oh, they're doing this because of the Port Wallace development and they're supporting a developer maybe kind of thing, right? But we know from the reports, we know from all of the work that this is something that needed to happen, that the synergy made the timing and everything else work really well. But how do we quantify that number, that the synergy saved us this much money?
I think that's a good point. We really focus on the benefit when we're doing our calculations for the cost sharing, because for instance, the local infrastructure and the wastewater and the bridge, for instance, has a lot of discussions around everybody paying their fair share. And we're really relying on our experience when we say that this is a synergy and we're saving money. But I think it's an exercise that I think could be done pretty easily on calculating the benefit, like that savings.
Awesome. Thank you.
And we'll do that.
Comment. Okay.
Oh, Alicia, you're saying, please, no.
Okay, the motion on the floor is that the Halifax Water Board approve funding for the Port Wallace Transmission Main Highway 118 crossing Shoeby Park to Dartmouth Crossing project at an estimated cost of $10,390,000. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion is carried. Thank you, Kevin.
Thank you.
Okay, moving on. Item 6, the corporate balance scorecard 2023 program and year-end results. I have a motion to be put forward.
I can do that, Madam Chair.
Go ahead.
Motion that the Halifax Water Board approve the corporate balance scorecard targets for the 2023-24 fiscal year, including the organizational award program, which is tied to the outcomes of the corporate balance scorecard organizational indicators as detailed in this report.
Mr. Cuddle will second. Louis?
Yes, we do have a short presentation, but I'll just ask Jake if he can, magically appears. So I'll run through this. I'll highlight some of the changes we made since the last time this came to the board and as a result of our workshop. And then I'll talk a little bit of the results and where the organizational award will end up for 2022-23. So in total, we met 22 of the 30 measures that are existing. We did meet the 2 gateway measures in terms of the expense to revenue ratio and the lost time accidents. There were several items that we will deal with around the people, so jobs filled internally, employee satisfaction. We continue to strive for an A rating. We continue to come in around a B+, so we're close but not quite there. And then we saw our absentee measure be higher than it has been in previous years. We also had the number of accidents per million kilometers driven was slightly above our target, so it was at 4.31 per million, and our target is 4. We've talked about this one before, the percentage of the capital budget spent for 22-23 was not met, and actually the annual cost per the wastewater customer connection was above the target, and when you look at the measures that were proposed, most of the impact of why we didn't meet that related to depreciation. So that was one of the changes that we're suggesting. So Jake, if you can go to the next slide. So again, the changes around depreciation. So the measures will remove, we're proposing the measures will remove depreciation when we calculate the ratios. And then we've added an additional measure for the total capital spend. In the financial statements and our reporting, we talked about spending this year about $93 million. The target that we continue to use through the IRP is 135, so we put that number into the measures this year as an additional target. We did talk earlier of adding 2 new measures related to our response time primarily around our permits and subdivision extensions. And then we have an adjustment that was made related to the energy reduction as a result of the capital project. So those additional changes are what we're proposing. So our organizational performance, the award is based on 12 key measures that are highlighted in the summary that we provide on page 433 of the package. We continue to have the same 2 gateway measures that must be met. So the gateway measures around the expenses, we do factor in, make sure we have the money to pay for the organizational award by generating additional savings. We do have a minimum threshold that we must meet of at least 7 of the 12 measures must be met. And then anybody who has worked for 9 months within the fiscal year is eligible for the award. So this is how it's calculated. If we get 11 or 12 of the measures, there were organizational awards, so each employee that's eligible would receive $1,000. If we have less than 7, there will be no organizational award paid. And this is how we ended up. So these are the scores, the 12 measures that are used. The results are that we met 9 of the 12. So the organizational award, if you can go to the next slide, okay, would be the $800. That's sort of the slide before. So yeah, so because we had 9, all the eligible employees would receive $800. So once we get approval from the board, we will announce the organizational award for the 22-23 fiscal year. The targets that are in the report for 23-24 we are suggesting the same organizational measures that go into the organizational award, same method of calculation. And then we have, in the report, we identify that we will bring a more detailed analysis around the corporate balance scorecard to the board for their review and approval. And then as a last step, this is part of, we are required to deliver an accountability report to HRM Council, and the organizational award is part of that communication and report. With that, there's the recommendation, which has been, I believe, has been read.
Thank you, Louis, and congratulations on meeting those targets. Jake, can you just go back to the slide with the details of the sort of 3-year trend?
So there is, it's page 433 of the report. It isn't included in the presentation.
Yeah.
Madam Chair, I suspect those slides were added lately to the package because I don't recall seeing that table, I think 2 days ago.
Yeah,
That's right. That's right, Commissioner Zaharov. I believe they just went in the last 10 minutes.
No, it was updated. There were a couple of measures that did not specifically say organizational award, so those were added in, but the table was there.
This table was here, but the presentation on the current results was not.
Yes, no,
Okay, thank you.
has not been circulated.
So the reason I asked for this to come back, I believe it captures the whole discussion. So it shows the current results that Louis just described to get 9 out of 12. And as well, it shows the 2023-24 descriptions of the adjustments and as well the targets as discussed at the board workshop. Are there any questions on let's start with the 22-23 results. Are there any questions on the last fiscal year results? Oh, go ahead, Commissioner Kolomeitsev.
Just a quick question. I was wondering if anyone could explain the 2 water leakage control reduction and peak flow reduction. Can someone speak to why they believe those ones were not met this past year?
I don't know if Shashil is still on the call or not.
Yes, I am. So, peak flow reduction, okay. The leakage control one is dependent on the number of leaks that we have, and we've got a very aggressive target on that. And that has not been met for the past few years. And we did reach our economic level of leakage, if you will, a few years ago. And ever since then, this is a number that probably will be revisited in the future. It is a very aggressive target for the age of the system and the nature of the system that we have. And that's why that number has not been met. The peak flow reduction number, that is the one that will be reported in the future because we rely on the data that comes from the flow monitoring exercise or the flow monitoring data that is supplied by an external contractor. And they had some issues actually past year and this year as well. And that data was not available at the time these were produced. So that data is imminent, I guess, in the next month or so. And at that time, this will be updated.
Is that one accounted for in the up to 12, like to get the maximum criteria? Is that one going to be eliminated then for last year?
No, we've continued to leave it in there. It is the results are required. The fact that the results were not available is part of our issue that will drive performance of the system. So we need to be better at getting the information to be able to look at this.
Okay, right. So part of that is just that having the data as part of meeting that criteria.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
other questions on last year's results? Okay, any questions on the targets set for 23-24, which is the right-hand column you're seeing? So you see the 3-year trend of the results as well as the targets from last year. Any comments on the 23-24 corporate balance scorecard? Go ahead, Commissioner Zahar.
Madam Chair, my question or comment is mostly about not 2023-4 targets, but rather than CSR, the corporate scorecard itself, the future of it. So should I hold on or can I go ahead with it?
Go ahead.
Okay, so if I remember correctly on the workshop, we discussed the scorecard, I think in details. And again, if my memory serves me well, I think the overall agreement was that for the next year, there will be a reevaluation because it sounded like that the current card is not really reflecting or not up to date with Halifax Water activities, the relevance of it, and some of the measures may not be relevant at this point in time, and as well as the organizational rewards level. I think we agreed that that will be looked at for the next year. So the comment here is that I think the supporting report just states that the executive will prepare a deeper analysis. I think deeper analysis does not really reflect on the expectation from the scorecard for the going forward. So it's probably reevaluation, if not an overhaul. Does it make sense? That Louis, is that more or less where we ended up in the workshop, or I'm confusing something?
I think the challenge now, as we discussed at the workshop, to make changes in June to the way it's calculated for 23-24 will be problematic based on where we are in our other conversations we're having with employees. So my understanding was we would continue with what we have now for 23-24 with a fuller conversation coming forward that will affect 24-25.
Yeah. So I was referring to 24-25. Sorry, I was not referring to 23-4. My comment was rather focused on how the card will be reevaluated for the next round, not 23-4 goals.
Okay.
Sorry for the confusion.
Yeah, what we've tried to communicate in the report is that there is work to be done. We'll be coming back to the board looking for additional guidance. We did not do that, and I don't think fully at the workshop, but we will look at that, bring it back over multiple stages to come back to the board for their review and approval.
Yep. Fine.
Okay, seeing no further questions, we have the motion on the floor. We'll call for the vote on the corporate balance scorecard. We're approving last year's year-end results of a score of 9 out of 12, and we're approving the targets as shown for 2023-24. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Any abstentions? Motion is carried. And on behalf of the board, congratulations to everyone and another fantastic year. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Item 7, diversity, equity, and inclusion policy.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Did you want to have the motion put on the floor before I begin?
Sure.
I'll put that on.
Go ahead.
Thank you. Move the Halifax Water Board approve the diversity, equity, and inclusion policy attached to the board report dated June 16th, 2023.
Second.
Oh, Commissioner Zaharov's hand went up first.
Okay.
Commissioner Zaharov will second that. Thank you, everyone. Go ahead, Heidi.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The board has a brief memorandum and also the draft policy package I don't intend to make substantive comments. That information has been provided. Of course, I'm here to answer questions. I will simply draw your attention to the fact that this is a policy that is part of the diversity, equity, and inclusion framework that was approved by the board in March last year. And it's simply this, from our perspective, is the nature of a policy that would require board approval as opposed to simply general manager approval, given the overarching impact and messages within the policy.
Any questions for Heidi? Go ahead, Commissioner Kolomeitsev.
What is the process for determining if the expectations laid out in this document are being met? So it says Halifax Water is expected to. Who's determining whether that has occurred or not?
Sorry, excuse me. So there would be a couple of ways for us to do that. One way is that we are intending to measure this, and we just have not yet determined those exact measurements. That is something that our Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee, which is a committee made of staff, will be looking into and considering. And I would also indicate and remind the board that as part of the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion framework that was approved by the board last year, those metrics and those kind of the ability to oversee and ensure that we are meeting those expectations is built within that framework. And we provide a report to the board on an annual basis in connection with that framework on the activities that have been undertaken and whether or not we've met expectations of the framework.
Go ahead, Commissioner
Right.
Kolomeitsev.
What do you mean by metrics? Can you give me an example of that?
So the metric would be an example. So if you look at the providing a fair, objective, and equitable staffing process, off the top of my head, perhaps a metric would be around the lines of, a review of responses to our advertisement and the impact, whether or not we've met a certain, percentage of candidates who are optioning to self-identify in that process. It is an optional thing, but that's just off the top of my head. That's why we have those metrics. Those are things that will be considered by the committee.
Thank you.
Any other questions? My question was, it clearly says it should apply to all staff. Any comment on whether we should broaden that? Should it apply to the board? Are we sort of limiting ourselves since as an organization, we fully support this policy? Is it just staff or should we broaden who it applies to?
Certainly if the board would apply to them as well, we could do that. I will say that we do have the governance manual that applies to the board, including the conflict of interest policy and all of the various expectations and responsibilities that are set out within that manual. It does include, respect and recognition of diversity and inclusion. But certainly, if it was the board's desire to have this apply to board members as well, we could make that change.
Go ahead, Commissioner Cuddle. Oh, sorry, you're on mute.
Here we go. Sorry, everything's still really tiny, so I can't see things. Yeah, I was just going to say that, in terms of it applying to the board, I think if it's in the code of conduct that we need to sign when we become commissioners, that's great, and maybe we can beef that up a bit in terms of adding some additional language around diversity and inclusion and what that means for us as a board. I think where we would come into some issues here in terms of applying this policy to the board would be around violations and how how that would apply to board members. I don't know if we could actually do that. We have this conversation at council all the time, so I think it's a different process. I don't know, Heidi, maybe you have some additional comments on that.
Yes, you're correct. You've correctly identified one of the issues. We do have other policies that that do apply to board members where we see it as being important from a optics perspective, I should say, to ensure that even board members are included in the policy. But to your point, as far as the violations and the impact of any violations, our ability to sanction board members is extremely limited. We can't do that. So that would be ultimately up to HRM and who administers the process of appointing and ensuring that board members are accountable, to the expectations that they've set out. So, that's a good point. It doesn't mean necessarily that the policy could not apply otherwise to board members. But to your point about the governance manual, we do currently have that document, which is intended to be specific and directed towards our commissioners. And so it would be, from my perspective, I think it would be within that document that we would be looking to, build that type of structure and expectation, which I think already exists. But if it's the will of the board for us to supplement that or increase it in some way, we can look into that.
Perhaps as part of this process in approving, this policy for Halifax Water employees, perhaps we can do a review of what we have in the governance manual as it pertains to the commissioners and to the board to make sure it's adequate and if necessary, make improvements there. Is that something that can be a follow-up action out of this? Or do we need a motion, or how would we ensure that we take a look at that?
So I don't think we need a motion. That can be noted as an action item for staff. I will simply ask for direction on the timing of when you would like to have that come back to the board. Of course, our next meeting in September. I do think that might be tight as far as the timeline to fully canvass that and review it. So it might be better for this to come back in either November or January.
Okay. If it was before the end of the year, I think that would be fine. I think before the end of the year would be fine.
End of the calendar year, just to be clear.
The calendar year, yeah, sorry.
Yeah.
Mr. Deagle-Gammon?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Heidi, help me remember, please, but I think I have a memory within the board governance manual that it says that commissioners will be aware of the policies of the commission. Isn't there a statement, or do I remember that from just the board orientation a while back? So that I think I remember thinking, become aware of the policies and where appropriate.
Yes, you're correct. And, there's just certainly some policies that will not apply logistically to commissioners. But a good example of one that does apply is the expense reimbursement policy. So we wouldn't be giving any preferential treatment to board members as it relates to expense reimbursement. We would be following that same policy that applies to our staff. So that's a good point.
Yeah, 'cause I think that it's kind of in there already, but I guess, yeah, a little see wouldn't hurt.
Absolutely, I agree. It's always good to go back through a document, review it, and ensure that it remains relevant. So we can do that with a view to having something back to the board by November. And to your point, Commissioner Deagle-Gammon, it could be that what we bring back to the board is simply the status quo is appropriate, or it could be, to your point, Commissioner Cuddle, that we bring back to the board that we think amendments are necessary.
Thank you for that recommendation. Okay, no further questions? Call for the vote. The motion on the floor is that the Halifax Water Board approve the diversity, equity, and inclusion policy attached to the board report dated June 16th, 2023. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? Motion is carried. Item 8, the CEO Climate Action Charter. Commissioner Cuddle, would you like to make this motion?
Absolutely. I move that the Halifax Water Board approve Halifax Water being a signatory to the Halifax Partnership CEO Climate Action Charter.
I'll second.
Mr. Deagle-Gammon has seconded that. I'm not sure who's presenting.
We don't really have a presentation. The information's provided. It did go to our Environment, Health and Safety Committee, who recommended it come to the board for approval. But happy to answer any questions if there are any.
Commissioner Deagle-Gammon.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So as a member of the Halifax Partnership, I would say that I would be so pleased to see the signature on the Climate Action Charter. I know that I believe, Louis, you were there when there was the unveiling of the charter, and some of the signatories were there. So absolutely, I believe the Halifax Water should be on it as well.
Commissioner Cuddle.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, so we did have a good discussion about this at Environment, Health and Safety, and felt that it was important that Halifax Water be part of the Climate Action Charter to kind of reflect not only, you know, the current work that we're doing around developing a climate action plan, but also, you know, our commitment to addressing climate action moving forward, you know, particularly as it pertains to water and stormwater and wastewater and critical infrastructure and all the other pieces that could be affected by climate change. So yeah, I think it'd be great to support this at the board level. And I think we, if I recall, and I can't, someone can refresh my memory on that, but I do recall at the meeting that we needed to bring this to the board for endorsement, if I'm correct. So we had the discussion at Environment, Health and Safety, but needed it to be endorsed by the board to move forward.
Thank you, Commissioner Cuddle. Any questions? Go ahead, Commissioner Zaharoff.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Not really a question, more of a follow-up comment to Commissioner Cattle. One of the things that we also discussed in the committee was that I think the conclusion was that we're not anticipating any impact on Halifax Water activities, or not any significant expenses associated with the approval or endorsement of this charter.
That's correct.
Okay, we'll call for the question. Motion on the floor, the Halifax Water Board approve Halifax Water being a signatory to the Halifax Partnership CEO Climate Action Charter. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion is carried. And thank you for bringing this forward. I think this is a remarkable motion for everyone in Halifax. Item 8A, disposal of surplus property. I have a motion to be put on the floor. Commissioner Zaharoff. Oh,
You're muted.
Sorry. Okay. Take two. So I'll move that the Halifax Water Board approve the disposal of surplus property policy as attached to the memorandum dated June 21, 2023.
I have a seconder. Commissioner Kent seconded that. The policy was in your package, and as well it was discussed at Audit and Finance. Are there any questions on the policy? Go ahead, Commissioner Schofield.
Thanks. I just wanted to ask, I didn't see it in the policy, and I assume it's embedded in the direct marketing by staff, but if there are any surplus parcels that would be valuable or useful for either HRM, province, like another order of government, or ourselves, is that considered first before a parcel of land would go through a public disposal, or is that part of the public disposal process?
So Halifax Water and HRM have certain agreements in place where there is a right of first refusal in place for particular properties. If there is no formal right of first refusal in place, there's no formal obligation on either side. However, we do tend to, ensure that there's no interest before we move forward. Of course, and I know you weren't suggesting this, just to be clear for everyone's benefit, of course, that does not alleviate the need for it's a real property for it to be sold at fair market value. And so that still is a consideration. It's not, so it would simply be that there would be an opportunity for HRM to be made an offer or to offer initially, but they would have to make such an offer that we believe to be at fair market value. And of course, it would go on from there for approvals as needed.
Okay, no, thanks, Patty. No, absolutely. We have the same requirement legally. It was just more if there was a piece of land that we hadn't been in discussions about that perhaps there would be a municipal benefit to, or, for that matter, the province, that, even though it's being sold at fair market value, we might not be the successful bidder, and that might impact the ability to do a project or something of that would be valuable to the citizens. So it was just a thought. Thanks.
Okay. Mr. Cuttle?
Yeah, so, following up on Denise's comments here, just what is the process exactly in terms of, where there is a relationship with Halifax to determine if there is interest in the property? Like, what is that process? Like, who do you pass this by to see if there's an interest or not?
Ultimately, it will depend on the potential use of the property. And so it could go to, it could, for example, go to the parks section within HRM or a different division within HRM. But generally speaking, when we are at a point where we have surplus property, then we would be making the inquiries within HRM at a high level, and those conversations would be had. And so as far as the formal process, there's not anything specific as it relates to we must speak to this person or that person. Many of our staff have numerous contacts throughout HRM and vice versa, and so those lines of communication are constantly, and we're having those conversations. But as of right now, we simply, there's no formal process. Part of the reason for that, to be blunt, is it doesn't come very often, quite frankly. Halifax Water doesn't tend to get rid of things. We're kind of hoarderish, I guess you could say, but in a very good way. So it's very rare that we determine that we do have surplus property. So, it's certainly not to suggest that that we shouldn't have a policy, but I guess on some level the thought would be, because it happens so rarely and because we haven't run into any issues, the process that we have in place, albeit an informal process, has been working and has been effective.
I would suggest it's been working and effective from your perspective. I don't know if it's been working and effective from Halifax's perspective. So I think a review of this might be something that's worth doing. From Halifax's side, in terms of the disposal of surplus property, we have different classifications of property, whether there's a community interest, an economic interest, a park interest. There's a whole category, a number of categories that get considered. But even within that, there isn't always communication across silos. So I have several examples where I think we've disposed of surplus property without really evaluating its future value to the city, which costs billions of dollars or millions of dollars to buy back. And so I don't know how this works, because HRM is the main stakeholder of Halifax Water, and some of the properties you have, I think of one that we did sell out for surplus, which was off of Washmill Creek. We did that a couple of years ago, I think, as surplus property. If there's so many initiatives at HRM, everything from transit corridors to affordable housing initiatives to environmental initiatives, that there are opportunities where, or there are situations where HRM might have an interest, and I just want to make sure that all the dots are getting connected before we let go of valuable land. And so Denise, I don't know if you have any further thoughts on this, but I mean, I know that I would like to see some kind of policy, because we do have this interconnected relationship, and it would be good to have that spelled out a bit more so we understand it and we can make sure that opportunities aren't getting lost.
Yeah, I think, Heidi, maybe you and I can chat a little further. We have our surplus properties is AO50s. So we have an AO50 process whereby our real estate department kind of shepherds potential pieces of land that we're going to sell or potentially going to purchase through all the business units to see if there's any municipal need for it. So we might be able to link you into that process so that it benefits both, as Councillor Cuttle saying, or Commissioner Cuttle saying, make sure we cover all the bases within HRM, but also it's one point of contact for you guys, so that you're not having to, even though I realize this doesn't happen that often, that you're not having to reach into the various places in the organization and try and find somebody you think might be interested. It could be run through that process, and then it's just a one point of contact. So we can chat offline if that's helpful.
Commissioner Culler, are you thinking?
Oh, who, me?
Okay, yeah. Is that
No,
okay?
that was a good answer. No, no, I was happy with Denise's answer. I had nothing more to add to that. I was waiting to hear a response from someone from Halifax Water on that thought of connecting with Denise offline about this. I guess my only thought would be, like, based on that discussion, would we have a follow-up back to the board on kind of what comes out of that discussion?
So obviously I'm happy to connect with Denise offline and have that conversation. Either myself or somebody else will do that. And so as far as the approval request that's before the board today, I don't think it changes this policy. I think what you're asking for is a separate process beyond what's within this policy. And certainly if the board would like us to check back in, we could. I would say that from my perspective, that policy would be operational and in turn could be approved by the general manager.
I agree, Heidi. I don't see the policy stands as it is. That what I'm talking about is just more of a way for implementation of it and following through. I don't see any reason why the board wouldn't approve the policy today. I think it's more of an ability to make it work a little smoother. That's all.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, everyone. Great conversation. Seeing no more questions, we'll call for the vote. Motion on the floor is that the Halifax Water Board approve the disposal of surplus property policy as attached to the memorandum dated June 21st, 2023. All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion is carried. Okay, item 8B, as per the added items, is newly numbered from 5I, the communications plan and approach. I believe Commissioner Zaharov wanted to bring this forward, and I'm hoping Jeff Myrick might be available.
I did reach out to him.
Okay.
There he is.
There he is. Hello, Jeff.
Hello.
Go ahead, Commissioner Zaharov.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and again, apologies for having the connectivity issues at the start of the meeting. Jeff, I had a question about the plan for the next year. So it looks more or less similar to, I think, whatever was last year. My biggest question or concern is related to the assistance programs and what's the plan for those. to how do we increase the awareness. From the customer survey, if I recall correctly, H2O fund had like 14% awareness of the public. So I'm just wondering how is it going to be addressed for the next year and what efforts will be done to increase the awareness. How are we going to notify the public and make sure this information makes it to the people in need? Thank you.
No, it's a really good point. And as part of our education and awareness plan, we've identified the H2O fund, the scholarships, as well as the Don't Flush It campaign as three big priority areas that we'll need to focus on for this year. In terms of getting information out, we are going to use the traditional bill insert to get it out there, as well as social media. And also we're doing an audit right now with the various touch points in the communities to figure out how they are communicating and what other resources they could use to actually or we could use to actually help facilitate getting more information out there. It is a challenge getting it in the hands of people that are actually going to need that, but we are focused on ensuring that we have a holistic approach to it. So,
and if I can add, we are in the process of looking at the affordability of our rates in the short term and long term. Certainly there will be lots of opportunities to discuss other measures that could help deal with affordability. So that's a coming attraction that we'll be bringing back to the board as well.
Okay, thanks. Also, I know that on Facebook, Halifax Water publishes, posts about different works almost on daily basis. So I was hoping we can throw in a few posts about the availability of those programs on Facebook as well, if it's not too complicated to share this information, so it will go out.
No, that's precisely it. The other part of this, of course, is understanding how we can use geo-targeted ads as well, which are pretty affordable and won't break the bank in order to be able to get the message out as well. But yeah, on Twitter and on Facebook, we can certainly promote the program, and hopefully people will share it. And we can also target some of the same organizations we're trying to audit right now in order to figure out how we can get the message out. So yeah, no, I totally agree with everything you're saying.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Jeff? Yeah, go ahead, Commissioner Cuddle.
I'm just wondering how we're going to evaluate the success of the campaign. Just back to the flushing one. It's what, we can look at the metrics of putting things out, but I'm just wondering if, with any campaign, like you kind of look like, was it effective? Wasn't it effective? Like, is there an opportunity to come back and kind of review the effectiveness of it to see if we need to pivot or do something different, or if it's resulting in the anticipated changes that we're looking for?
That's a really good point. I would say that right now our benchmark is pretty low. I think any movement of the needle at all would be a sign of effectiveness, especially if we change things up and how we're doing things. I think in order to be able to really fully get an idea, it would mean 100% uptake on the H2O fund, and right now that's not what the case. So I think we just need to ensure we have our touch points in place, and once we have that secured, then we can start looking at different metrics. But right now the bar is low.
Any follow up on that, Kenda?
Yes, thank you, Commissioner Rawlings. Just with respect to the flexible campaign, right now our operations crews will tag when they have to do repairs to pumps due to blockages or where they have to clear lines due to blockages, and if the blockages are attributed to fletching products that shouldn't be going down into the system. And then our pollution prevention team will have a targeted education session and try and triage and use that works work order system that we have to manage and direct some of their work. So I think one of the things that we can probably look at is it might be a long-term measurement is the effectiveness and the of the campaign with lining up with repeat work by operations crews. So if we see that a pump station does not need to be cleaned or that it's not getting clogged as frequently, that might be a little bit of an indicator of the success of such a program. So we can certainly and have been using CityWorks to track some of that work, and we can use that to track some of the success.
Okay, that's great. I just want to say I met a couple of your employees who work in pollution prevention at the barbecue last week, and had a really nice chat with them. One was an employee for, I think, 15 years and the other for 5 years. So for the one who was there for 5 years, it was her first barbecue because she was kind of a COVID hire, yes. I guess. So yeah, they're doing great work and enthusiastic, and it was really interesting conversation with them. So I stood in line for my hot dog. The other thing I wanted to say was also reaching out to stakeholders. Like when it's businesses, like some communities, we have business improvement districts. I mean, there's other methods of getting the message out. And I would say, to go beyond social media to kind of connect with those community and stakeholder groups would be an effective way of, sending out education or public messages or whatever, the campaign is. And as well as HRM facilities like libraries and community centers. I think I remember we had a discussion. I think we had a discussion about this. Even putting things in the bathrooms, like in the, the ads on the doors and bathrooms or whatever, where there's like, things, toilets, that whole piece as well. Because not everybody is on social media, and not everyone's going to get those messages, even with the targeted spends. But yeah, I just wanted to add that. Thank you.
Thank you for that. And thank you, Jeff. I think we're going to our last agenda item, 8C, which was formerly 7I, the report on, my computer won't work, the report on institutional capacity. I think my question is a bit a follow-up to the conversation Kostya and Reed were having about the capital plan. So it might be a Reed question if he's still available. About a year ago, he had articulated his plan for the engineering department and focusing maybe on junior engineers. I was just wondering if he had any follow-up based on the institutional capacity and sort of the current market and all the other pieces.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, as I mentioned earlier to Councillor Zaharov's question, well, I guess I'm trying to just take your question apart and figure out which parts to answer. So, yeah, part of our realignment was to be able to have more of a diversity of different levels of engineering skill. And as we did the reorg, I think we partially achieved that, whereas a couple of years ago we had no junior engineers in the department. I think we now have 3, not as many as we'd like to have, but we're continuing to work on that. And we've done a reasonable job of identifying our more senior engineers that have 25, 30 years experience and put them into greater areas of responsibility. I guess the other part of your question, as we, like I had mentioned, we filled 6 of 8 last year. We've got about 10 that we're just about to go to competition for. I think we still remain a preferred employer. I think our work is interesting. People like to come and work for us, but there are less people out there looking around. So we're going to see what this competition brings in. But we have been talking about a number of things. I've been talking to Ann Sherwood at HRM, who's thinking of the same things. We are going to start getting earlier into the graduating class at Dalhousie because there are private sector employers that we compete with for staff that go and start meeting, sort of doing job fair type things with the incoming graduates at Dal. So we've had preliminary discussions about doing that. And I think there's things we can do with the Immigrant Settlement Association of Nova Scotia, because no doubt when people immigrate to Canada, there's engineers and other people, with technical skills we need that are looking to find a landing place. So if we can just make ourselves more of a known and preferred employer to those. So those are a few of the thoughts, and Rochelle and I have been having those conversations. So I don't know if I fully answered your question.
That was great. Thank you for that. Any comments, Rochelle? No.
No, I have no further comments.
Anyone else have a question on the institutional capacity report? No? Okay. Thank you for that, Reid.
Quick one.
Oh yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, I wasn't fast enough with unmute button. So if I'm looking at the table, so basically the overall roster increased by 5 people comparing to the 6 months ago. Is this more or less in line with the previous plan, or it goes slower or it goes faster? I just don't recall. And I think the open positions that were approved, like it was like 20 something. So the plan was to fill them in within a year, and this goes slower because of some of the retirements and departures. How are we making out against the plan, basically?
Do you want me to answer that, Heidi? Yes, thank you, Commissioner Rafaf. That it is slower than what we anticipated. Actually, we've seen the results and we were kind of, wow, it's kind of a little bit of a perfect storm for us. So right when people are leaving, and then we have to hire a lot of people for the services, and then with the labor market. So we're taking a look at that, and we are, like we said, we're getting resources in the Human Resource Department to assist us with that. So yeah, it's a little bit slower than what we'd liked, but hopefully we'll improve upon that in the future with some of the initiatives that we're taking on.
I will just add, Rochelle, that we were expecting the number of retirements, obviously, and that number is going to remain relatively consistent for the next few years, just because of the nature of the generation that we're getting to. But at the same time, to Rochelle's point, we have been, like everyone else in this industry and in the world, frankly, been challenged with a very challenging job market at this point, which has restricted our ability to be as proactive or perhaps as successful, or I don't know exactly how you characterize it. I will say that at least from my perspective, some of the good news that comes out of this report is that we are seeing internal movement, which is positive. That's the kind of thing we want to see within the organization. Of course, it's a blessing and a curse, because when you move internally, it simply creates another position that we then have to fill, and so it does create activity and work on our end. But we're happy to see that our employees are having that opportunity to move through the organization. So I think that's a positive thing. We'll continue to work through this and recognize that, to Reid's point, that we're going to have to start a little bit more creative about how we go about recruiting and promoting Halifax Water in order to remain competitive.
And if I may add, I will say I've had conversations with the CAO about strengthening the relationship with HRM related to opportunities Halifax Water, or vice versa at HRM, to be able to move people back and forth through the organization's potential a little bit easier to help with some of this. I think Halifax Water is a great spot for HRM employees to get exposure to things and vice versa. Right now, HRM seems to be on the winning side of that equation, and we're hoping to balance some of that off with some good hard conversations.
Commissioner Deagle-Gammon.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I know we talked about, getting into Dell and graduating classes in terms of the engineering stuff. Does Halifax Water go outside the province to other institutions to look for staff? Do we go outside the province at all? And recruitment, is there an recruitment kind of thing that happens, outside the province?
So my understanding, and Michelle, you can correct me if I'm wrong on this, but my understanding is that we don't have any formal recruitment drives that are outside of the province.
Okay.
But that is something, to Reed's point, that we may need to look at in the future. As to, do we broaden that horizon a bit? To be honest, off the top of my head, Commissioner Deagle-Gammon, we'd have to look into what the potential market would be in those areas and whether we could benefit from it. Of course, if we thought we could and we saw there being a potential that we would go to those places as well.
Yeah, we're starting to see that in the corporate world, that their recruitment drives are pretty targeted to different schools, et cetera, right? The research has been done on the quality of the graduates, follow up, all that kind of stuff, and then targeted recruitment drives in other universities around the country. So yeah, just a comment for consideration. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. I think that brings us to the end of the formal agenda. I just had a few thank yous. I was hoping that any of the staff on the call could pop on camera. Hopefully we didn't lose them all. No, that was fast. Did Jake do that?
Not that quick.
Thank you. You did? Thank you, everyone. The June board meeting is always a very busy one. There's lots of approvals, but at the end of the day, it also is a mark of success. We're often discussing the previous fiscal year and our financial results, as well as our corporate balance scorecard. So I just wanted to take a moment and thank all of you for the hard work that goes into that. In addition to preparing for this meeting and putting all those reports together, I believe all of you were a huge support in the recent wildfires. You continue to amaze the board as you tackle anything that is thrown at you and support the success of both Halifax Water as well as Halifax Regional Municipality. So a huge thank you to all of you. We do have a sad note. The board was very sad to receive news of Sushil Arora's resignation. We did want to congratulate him, though. Our loss is the gain of the Atlantic First Nations Water Authority. So we do hope we will continue to work together with him as a colleague. But thank you, Sushil, for all your hard work and contributions to Halifax Water.
Thank you, Colleen, and I thank the board for all their support over the years, and for sure that collaboration will continue, and I hope to strengthen that collaboration through AFNWA. Thank you.
We can't wait, Sushil. As well, we received notice of Commissioner Schofield's retirement. So again, she was only with us a short time officially, but she has been supporting Halifax Water through her efforts at HRM for decades, and I had the privilege to work with her. So thank you so much, Commissioner Schofield, and we wish you well with your next adventures.
Thank you very much. It kind of threw me when you said decades, but it has been decades, which is scary how fast it goes.
I can only say that because I know I have worked with you for decades.
I was going to say, yeah, you're right there, Colleen, in those decades too.
Thank you so much. So earlier in the meeting, we approved the appointment of the new GM. And again, a further thank you to the entire staff. It has been a very busy 6 months as we looked for someone to succeed Kathy O'Toole. And I would be remiss to not personally thank Louis for his acting GM role. He continues to show remarkable leadership. It has just been a phenomenal experience, and you're not done yet. You still have some time left, but we did want to point out what a great job you've done and how much we appreciate it. And of course, we know that's had a domino effect within the organization, as you mentioned, that many others have been supporting you, but we did want to thank you as well.
Well, thank you. And it has been a wonderful privilege to be able to be the acting general manager. Thank you.
So we want to make sure that's all noted in the minutes, because it's really important. We don't often take the time to celebrate our successes, and we will probably have a very similar thank you speech at the AGM, but I did want to put it on the record at this regular board meeting as well. So thank you, everyone. That was a long agenda, but I think we finished on time. And a reminder that the AGM is coming up in July, so we will see everyone there. Could I have a motion to adjourn? Commissioner Zaharov has made the motion. Thank you, everyone. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Well done.